Do you think we are witnessing the undoing of Megxit?
I think there are people on two sides of this blanket, and they each of them have a thread in their hands, and they're pulling it. I think it is being unpicked, and they think it's going to happen. They think, they feel optimistic that they are on their way back in.
Well, folks, the Boshoff is back with another massive, massive story in the Daily Mail, and I'm delighted to say that she's joining me for this pre-recorded interview, which I'm recording on Saturday afternoon and will go out in a few hours' time. It's an extraordinary piece. If you haven't seen it yet, there's just bombshell after bombshell inside it, as you would expect from Alison, of course. My line that I latched onto was a source telling Alison when Harry, was madly in love with Meghan, he could be blind enough to choose her. Now things are different and the veil is lifting. My goodness, put the kettle on. You are not going to want to miss this one. Welcome back. If you're new here, please hit subscribe. This is The Royalist with Tom Sykes. I have today as my guest one of the most formidable reporters. Really, Alison is a showbiz reporter, but she started doing a bit more on the Royals, which is only good news for those of us who love scandal and gossip and scoops. Alison Boshoff, a lady whose byline has been for years a very reliable early warning system about what is going on inside the House of Sussex. So, Alison, thank you so much for being here today. This is an extraordinary scoop. You say in it that something I've been talking about for a long time, that the couple are seeking to reverse Megxit. We're going to get into all of that. I've got a couple of questions to kind of guide you through the story. So, Alison, first of all, could you take us back to last Friday? Tea at Highgrove, Harry, Meghan, Archie, Lilibet, Charles, and significantly Camilla. What were the terms of the meeting, Alison?
So as far as I was told, the terms were really simple, which was that it was to be kept private. So that means no Instagram, no photos, no camera crew, no blabbing about it afterwards to anybody. So, the idea was that this was a chance for Harry to rebuild some of the trust that he had torpedoed repeatedly over the last 5 or 6 years, and actually just keep it zipped. Ditto double for Meghan.
And I mean, so far, the signs are that people have managed to keep it quiet, haven't we? Because we actually don't know anything about what happened there, which has fed its own conspiracy theories that, the meeting didn't happen, which I don't accept, and which we don't need to get into. I talked about yesterday with Mark Dolan on the podcast. But, I mean, so far, is that being seen as an encouraging sign that nothing has leaked?
Yes, and I think there's a real determination from the Sussex side that this is perceived in a positive way. And they, the person I spoke to who's in that camp was talking about sort of, baby steps and whatever, but in the right direction. And it's all, at this point, it's all about direction of travel. And I think that, people, when you write things about the Sussexes that are positive, people dislike them so intensely, people don't actually want to believe it. So let's go to our old friend, observable facts, because I know how you love that, observable facts. Look at Harry in that podcast with Joe Marler. Was that the therapized, peevish, grudge-nurturing prince who had been on every shrink's couch in California and was going to do EMDR and all that? No, that was not. This was, boobs, rugby and bums, Harry, wasn't it? This was back to a completely different prince, not a prince who you imagine is going to take cocktails with the smart set in Montecito. This was Harry, like you waved a wand and the last 10 years hadn't happened.
That podcast was the weirdest thing that I've seen in a long while. It was super, super weird because it was just such a massive exercise in like sort of whiplash. And as you say, so different to the image that he's been putting out for years, really, about being a kind of deep thinker and a thoughtful guy. And You know, I was just manipulated by the palace into looking like a cheerful chappy, etc., etc. But what you see the more, you know, traditional Prince Harry, cheek, as you say, boobs, bums, and rugby, Prince Harry that we saw in that podcast. Do you see that as a significant part of the journey back to sort of emoting towards the UK, trying to say, I'm still the Harry I was. Please, can I come back?
I think, he really wants to be liked. And that was what was so interesting when I was talking to my source, and he said, Harry and Meghan both feel that America is kind of cooling on them and that it's difficult. And they want to be liked in the UK now. And that's where they're focusing, a kind of a charm offensive. And I think, and bizarre as it was, as you said, there's a kind of sense of whiplash with that Joe Marler podcast. But I think this is Harry wanting to be liked, and he's trying to be appealing again to ordinary people who have, not enjoyed being called racists and not enjoyed the things he said about his family. And again, maybe what we also need to think about is, okay, so Harry has had a long time to pursue this path of freedom, if you want to call it, isolation, emancipation. He needed to get out from his family. I can see that. That was an imperative for him psychologically. But now he's done that, he doesn't want to carry on doing that because he sees what the end game is with Meghan, whose father was desperately ill. She didn't go see him. And there's still absolutely no contact between them. That's not what he wants. And he has said that's not what he wants for him and his children. So he has to start to turn his head towards the UK again, to visit more frequently with less drama, and and bring Meghan and the kids as often as he can. And I think we're absolutely going to see that.
I would argue, and I know it's not the point you're making, the point you're making is that he wants to be liked by the UK again. I mean, I would argue that podcast was a massive misjudgment. I think that the thing about Harry before was that it was the right side of the line, and this thing about defecating in the shower and nobody's going to clear it up, I just don't think that's going to play very well with the kind of grannies who Harry used to make blush a little bit, but but I know that's not the point you're making. I'm just adding that as an aside. What I'm really fascinated by is this line about a friend saying that he feels a bit unwelcome in America that you just referred to. It's extraordinary how completely Harry and Meghan have withdrawn from American life, really, since the second Trump presidency, isn't it? I mean, they don't seem to have any charities. They don't seem to have any public work. They don't seem to be out and about particularly very much, apart from a few kind of local things. Or, it was a slight surprise to see Harry at the Time 100 the other day. Whereas they couldn't make it clearer, or Harry certainly couldn't make it clearer, how much he wants to reconnect with England, whether it's a essay saying that I may currently live in the United States. I mean, imagine if he said I'm currently married to Meghan, or whether it's Archie in a photograph wearing an England football shirt, or whether it's coming back to the United Kingdom and having tea with the King. So could you talk a bit more about how they're withdrawing and feel a bit unwelcome in America?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually surprised to hear that, because I had, and we've discussed it, I had intuited already from speaking to people, in showbiz circles that, they were, not popular anymore, and through their, behavior, and deals had fallen apart and all the rest of it. But, the pennies dropped. And I was actually quite surprised to hear that from this source, because this is a source who knows Harry really well, but also is very much plugged into all of Harry's sort of charity crowd. So all the people who work with Harry when he's working with his good causes. And I was really surprised that this had been a topic of discussion among these people, was that Harry was, feeling like he wasn't actually all that welcome in America anymore. And Meghan was also feeling like, what was it he said? She has to push and push. So yeah, I mean, and that's the absolute truth of it. But I think it's interesting that they are perceiving that, because 18 months ago, I spoke to a communications professional on Team Sussex who said to me, Harry's never coming back to the UK. He has no interest in it to live. Never coming back to the UK, loves his life in California. He's here forever. And that has completely changed, hasn't it? Just turned around quite quietly while we've all been looking at other things, that their eyes are on Europe again and the UK.
Yeah. So, okay. So it is, as you say, and I've experienced the same thing, when speaking to their office, like it's gone from he's loving California, he's loving the California sunshine and swimming in the pool to, of course, he wants to spend more time in the United Kingdom. It's his home. Of course, he wants to. He just needs his security back and all will be solved. You have this really, really fascinating report in your story that the house in Portugal is part of the plan of getting back to Europe and back to the UK. And would I be correct in thinking that you originally broke the story of the house, of them having the house, Alison?
No, that was my colleague Richard Eden, and it then went so quiet about that house that I actually didn't think it existed. I didn't think it had been bought. I thought perhaps they were looking at it, interested in it, it hadn't come off. But then last week, it was confirmed to me by someone who absolutely 100% knows for sure. And yeah, that house was bought. And the reason that we never saw them there was that it basically bought off plans. They had it built. So it's taken a couple of years. And my source wasn't sure it's actually finished yet or in what state
And is it definitely in the resort that Eugenie's husband represents?
Yes. And so it was bought, it wasn't bought as a staging post to come back to the UK. It was bought so that they could partake in cousinly friendship with Eugenie and the kids, if that was what they wanted. That was bought for that reason, so that their kids could get to know their cousins, and Harry could spend time with his cousin Eugenie.
And Eugenie, sorry, just to interrupt you, but just to remind our viewers, Eugenie has very much positioned herself in the Sussex camp. She's been photographed with Harry and Meghan in California. She's gone out to see them. She's been photographed having dinner. She's been photographed going to sports events with them. She lived in their house, Frogmore Cottage, for a certain period of time. Sorry, carry on, Alison. So part of the goal of it was that they could have contact with some other members of the royal family.
Yes, well, just really Euge and her family. But now his camp is saying, but actually, because of the unsettled security question, suddenly the house in Portugal looks like a kind of genius piece of strategic forward planning. We know the Sussexes don't do that, by the way, but it looks like a genius piece of strategic forward planning because they've got a really safe, really private place in Europe that is only a short hop on a helicopter or a private jet over to the UK, to wherever they please in the UK. So actually, the friend in Harry's camp was saying to me, this actually can be really useful to them as a sort of staging post now.
Very, very interesting. So the notion that they could be spending more time in Europe rather than specifically in the UK. I mean, obviously they don't feel there's any security risk in Portugal, or maybe they just can't bother to have that argument. But then you go on to say, to cite sources who basically, between the jigs and the reels, say that Meghan is all for Meghan is all for reconnecting with his English side, that Meghan wants to come back to Britain. I mean, I thought that she hadn't particularly enjoyed her time here. I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, she was, don't forget, and we're not going to be flippant and downplay or disbelieve her genuine distress, but she said she hated it so much she was suicidal. They took her passport and we were all a bunch of racists. And now she wants to return.
Which I hasten to add, is a crime to remove somebody's passport in the United Kingdom. So just mentioning that.
Listen, I was there with my pen and my notepad, Tom, and I was, sucking my teeth as I was writing it down. But this was what was said. Whether we believe it or not, this is what is being put about by friends of the Sussexes, that Meghan really wants it to. Maybe she just wants it because she wants her husband to be happy. That would be a nice way to look at it, wouldn't it? But I think it's becoming apparent that Harry isn't all that happy in California. And as my source said, a different source, the veil is lifting. Things seem to be shifting, right? And that glorious freedom/isolation is no longer seeming to suit Harry, and he wants reconnection. And she is at least saying that she wants to go along with it.
I mean, it's so interesting the way things have shifted. And obviously, we were both talking about this, we have been talking about this for a while, that there's been some kind of straws in the wind, that a return to the United Kingdom in some shape or form was going to be facilitated by Harry's father, King Charles III. Then, of course, we had this actual meeting last week, despite the fact that Harry had frankly behaved appallingly, to the extent that former Lord Chancellors felt moved to comment to the Times of London that they thought his behaviour, launching a personalised attack on Judge Nicklin, was disgraceful. And but still, despite all that, we had this meeting at Highgrove on Friday, and we then had briefing in the Sunday Times. That every step of a million miles begins with 1,000 steps or some nonsense. I can't remember the formulation. That blood is blood, and at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what Harry's done because blood is blood. And the king basically wants him back. And it's very interesting now that you're hearing the same thing from their side. So it seems like there's a convergence. It seems like everybody's interests, arguably apart from Prince William's, are aligned in this.
I think they are. And, Harry, let's not blame it all on Harry. Perhaps it was his team. But, the behavior in the run up to that visit, almost everything that they could do to turn it into a disaster, they did. Almost every way that he could court for it not to happen, happened. That thoroughly, in my view, disgraceful briefing to ITN News of that document from his security team saying that he was under terrorist threat. And that seemed to be their last ugly throw of the dice to try and force some movement on security. I don't believe much happened, but yet he came, and they are all now tripping over themselves to say how fantastic. Now, what I did hear, which I didn't find space for in the article, was that Harry deplores the briefing that went on and felt that the detailed briefing, yeah, I know, you're rolling your eyes, the detailed briefing was not in his interests, and that he's going to make some changes to his team.
Well,
so
right? Yeah, I think it's incredibly unfair. And I think that, the idea that any communications professional wakes up in the morning and makes up stories about their principles without being told to is absolutely ridiculous. But we've seen it before, and we know, don't we, Alison, about the ever-growing membership of the Sussex Survivors Club, and maybe it will have a few more members before too long.
Well, they want to blame somebody for the stuff that didn't go right. We all know this happens in the world.
Of course. It's the what's the word? It's the privilege of the incredibly rich to blame everybody else. I'm often reminded of the amazing story in Valentine Lowe's Courtiers, where somebody's messed something up. They say and Meghan says, "Well, we need to do it all again," and the person says, "Well, I'm terribly sorry, but I don't think there's going to be time. I don't think I'm going to have the bandwidth to do it again in the limited amount of time available." She said, "Oh, don't worry. If there was literally anybody else on earth I could ask to do this, I wouldn't be asking you." Right, there we go.
Nice.
That's the management style. Do you think that this return to the UK ultimately is money driven? That Spotify's dead. Netflix seems to be pretty much winding down. Obviously, 55 million pots of jam have been sold. We are reliably informed, but maybe they haven't. How much do you think let me put it another way. Do you think they'd be coming back if Netflix had renewed the deal for another $100 million?
That's a really good question, isn't it? I wonder. Although I think, on a human level, your father having cancer, trumps everything, doesn't it? I think they're in a real pickle because at the moment they are pursuing this kind of hybrid model where they get to make money and merch every last breath as long as they're not in the UK, and then Harry thinks it'll all kind of be okay as long as he just does his charity work in the UK. But if he was to come back permanently, what does that look like? Because does he go back and start being bankrolled by the Bank of Dad again? I don't think he would wear it, or Meghan. So I think it's going to still have to be hybrid. They are going to still have to try and financially stand on their own 2 feet. And please, viewers, get your hankies out. These 2 people in their 40s are going to have to actually support themselves.
And we saw, of course, didn't we, in Spare, how incredibly upset Harry was about having to buy his own sofa. So, I hope it doesn't upset them too much. But I think that, and you in this article, you talk about, reversing Megxit, which is obviously huge. And the late Queen, of course, banned precisely this half in, half out arrangement in one of her final constitutional acts, tried to put some ground rules down to stop them doing it. But I think that really what they want hasn't changed from 6 years ago, which is they want to have the freedom to do and say whatever they like, to be completely free of the collective discipline of the royal family, to do the odd royal job as it pleases them. And I think that the key point for them is that if they can negotiate with Charles, which I actually suspect they will, some very tiny little royal role, some very little official duty in the UK, that'll unlock everything for them. That'll unlock security, it'll unlock a place to live, it'll unlock a completely different level of legitimacy in the UK, and it'll basically be they will have won. I mean, I think it's a massive gamble by Charles because they're so unbelievably unpopular. Do you think this is we are witnessing the undoing of Megxit?
I think there are people on two sides of this blanket, and each of them have a thread in their hands, and they're pulling it. I think it is being unpicked. Whether this actually happens, I don't know. And you have your wonderful sources in the palace. I don't. I'm just showbiz queen. So, and I've got some fingers in the Harry and Meghan pie. So all I can tell you for sure is they want it to happen, and they think it's going to happen. They think they feel optimistic that they are on their way back in some way.
And we know, of course, the next big staging post in this campaign. I mean, there may be a mini staging post in September as well, Charles, but the big staging post is Birmingham next year, Invictus 2027 in Birmingham. In your report, you're hearing 10 days based in or near Highgrove. I mean, I have to say, I've heard a month that they could be in the UK for, or that they're saying that. Now, to be fair, this time around, they said they were going to be here for 2 weeks. And of course, in the event, it seems like they were here for all of them were here for less than, well, certainly less than a week. What do you think summer 2027 looks like, or what do people around them think that summer 2027 looks like?
The people around them think summer 2027 is all 4 of them in the UK, public facing, at Invictus events. Harry wants to bring his children there. He wants his children to see him on the stage. He wants his children to see this work that he does there, which he regards as, his most meaningful role, aside from being their dad. So yeah, that's what it looks like to them. I actually think if that's going to happen, I think that we're going to have to see them again a couple of times before Invictus. I would imagine that they must come out in the Easter holidays. The kids are both at school. I would imagine there must be some kind of springtime visit to work, to step up to Invictus.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely hearing a lot of chatter about they're all going to come in September, and actually suddenly rather like security suddenly didn't matter. Suddenly going to school doesn't matter, which, let's be honest, when you're 7, I mean, plenty of people take time off school, Well, it's an absolutely fascinating article. Alison, I want to ask you about another thing. And I've had a couple of people on over the past week. I had Nicole Lampert on talking about her experience. You were part of the case that Harry brought. I don't think any of your stories were part of Harry's specific action. But Nicole talked about the unbelievable stress that being dragged to court in that action brought on her, and her kind of anger about it. Do you feel angry about the way your life was disrupted for those years? And tell us about your role in the case as much as you can.
Okay, yeah. So really briefly, I was in court over one article that I'd written in 2003 about Sadie Frost. She was one of the complainants.
23 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even, when it was shown to me by the lawyers, I didn't have any recollection of writing it. I've written so many articles since then, and it wasn't even a very interesting one. It's a horrible feeling because what is happening is you're being accused of serious criminal acts, which, if you were guilty of, you shouldn't actually have a job as a journalist. But it's so long ago, it's a kind of a he said, she said, because how do I prove what I didn't do in July 2003 on a story that I probably worked on for a morning? I mean, it's really difficult. So, there's always that absolute fear that you aren't going to be believed. So yeah, it was horrible, and the countdown was nasty, and I was, obviously quite afraid of David Sherborne. But actually, when I got there, do you know, he looked absolutely done in. He looked like a knackered old pony. He really did. His suit didn't fit. His hair looked bad. He was struggling to kind of make his way through the argument. At the end of it, he said, "Oh, Miss Boshoff, no further questions." The judge says, "No, stop. You haven't actually asked her the substance of the complaint." He said, "Oh yes, so I put it to you. You hacked a phone to get this information, and you employed someone to blag this information from Sadie Frost." And I went, "Well, no and no, but actually I'm going to answer a bit more fully, because I've been here for 2.5 hours and you've only just asked me, last gasp." He couldn't get me off the stand fast enough. He could not get rid of me quick enough. And so, from my experience, I thought, well, they're really struggling to make this case because they're alleging extremely serious things and they don't have any evidence that it didn't happen, that it did happen. And the reason they don't have any evidence that it happened is because it didn't happen. So go figure. So, and the judge really made that same call on every one of those 57 counts. There was just simply no evidence that it had happened because it just didn't happen. So
it was extraordinary, wasn't it? And Nicole had a kind of similar story actually, where she was there, and David Sherborne goes on and on and on about like some very roundabout thing to do with Elton John, and then finally gets to the core of it and suggests to Nicole, who obviously we both know from working at Associated, suggests to Nicole Lampert that she got the cost of the security, that he had to pay the police, that she got that figure from hacking the phones of police officers. And Nicole said she just looked at him and went, "Are you mental?"
I know.
She wasn't thinking straight, but she just couldn't believe it. She said, "Why would I risk like a serious crime, like hacking a police officer's phone to get like a tiny detail for a story?" And by the way, I was given it by Gary Farrow, who was Elton's publicist.
I know. I mean, it is it is almost funny what you're being accused of, because you're being accused. I mean, one of the accusations against me was that this, and David Sherborne got on and on and on about Sadie Frost, so private, and she'd never tell anyone this information. So the only way you could have got it is by hacking her phone or by paying someone to ring her up, like ring her up cold, and blag this information out of her. And I said to him, "Sorry, it's just absurd. So you think that I'm going to pay someone to ring her up and say, 'Oh, hello, I'm the milkman or I'm the florist. I've got a delivery for you.' And she's going to tell that person all about the ins and outs of her divorce from Jude Law." I mean, it makes no sense, because because it's simply not true. And it's not the way we ever worked. But, fine. It's over now. So I'm so pleased.
Yeah. No, it was the whole thing was completely mad. And of course he made this same argument. Harry made this argument with Katie Nicholl and Charlotte Griffiths. Like, basically, I think Katie Nicholl, he actually said on the stand, he said, "Oh, the only reason she was going to parties every night was because it was like a massive cover story to cover the fact that she was just sitting at home ordering my phone to be hacked. And if she hadn't been at the parties, there wouldn't have been any explanation for how she'd got the story." So it was all like she never got any information. A diary journalist never got any information going to a party. And then of course they made the same claim with Charlotte Griffiths, saying that the only way anyone could have got any information was by hacking. And then of course, having dragged Charlotte Griffiths to court, Charlotte Griffiths, having kept Harry's secrets for 15 years, was then obliged to reveal that string of messages, which were obviously very embarrassing for her, but I mean, completely sunk Harry's case, and I think were probably instrumental in what happened. Can I ask you one more question?
Of course.
About it, and then I will never ask you about it again. Did you find it like really stressful? Were you like not able to sleep and stuff? Because like Nicole said, she wasn't able to sleep and that it kind of hung over her, or were you able to compartmentalize?
Well, I'm a tough old bird. I did find myself waking up and struggling to get back to sleep in the sort of week before, when it was really the countdown, and also obsessively refreshing news feeds to read about how my colleagues had got on the stand before me, because I was about sort of 5 or 6 weeks into it. So yeah, no, it was a tough day, and I did go back to Waterloo Station straight away and walk into the Marks and Spencers there and buy 3 tins of Negroni and down them all on the train. It was one of those days. I was just like, oh my God, that was awful. Yeah.
Well, Alison, 3 Negronis Boshoff, thank you so much for being with us today. Fantastic story in the Mail. Look it up. Alison, thanks for being here.
Great to see you, Tom, always.
And all that remains for me to say is, God save the King.